Hello, and welcome to our pocket dimension of the internet. You've stumbled across 1shots, the Drinking TTRPG. I'm Callie, and I'll be your host for this evening. Let's walk through the setup for a game of 1shots. There are several material components you will need. The game mat, on which the game materials are placed. The dice, which are placed over their respective dots on the game mat. The shot glasses, which are placed over the dice. The bottle caps, which are placed on the dots between the 5-letter words, or the deck of cards, which is placed on the deck dot. In 1shots, there are 3 different roles that can be assigned to members of the group. A regular is in charge of the narrative actions for a single character, and the characters that the regulars play during the adventure are collectively known as the crew. You can think of it as though all the players are all animators on a classic Disney film. Can we say Disney? We can say Disney. The regulars are the lead animators assigned to a specific character. Anytime the regular's character is in a scene, the regular is in charge of drawing that one character's presence and interactions with everything around them. Now, there are other animators in charge of set design and populating the world with characters not important enough to get a lead animator devoted completely to them. In 1shots, we call this role the house. The house is in charge of all the supporting cast and the rest of the world. That is, everything that the regulars are not in charge of. One or more regulars can double dip as the house depending on what the group wants. Today, I'll be both the house and a regular, although my regular will often take a back seat as I run the rest of the game. Now, in our modern tabletop role-playing game landscape, I believe there is a third role that has risen to more prominence from its usual place in the shadows. Along with the rise of actual play shows, we've seen the rise of the audience, although they've always been there on the sideline. Audience members are the people who participate simply by being present. This could be a friend that just wants to see how things work without committing to being a player, a sibling who tagged along but doesn't like TTRPGs, or a crew member on a film set for a 1shots promotional video. That's you. Audience members can still contribute by laughing or suggesting ideas, but just like the other roles, if an audience member makes a suggestion, the regular or house in charge of the affected story element doesn't have to follow the suggestion. Today, Destiny, Derek, and I will be the regulars, and I will be the house, and the crew will be the audience. And if you're watching this, you will also be the audience. We just can't hear your laughter or suggestions. We have some easily accessible supplements to help regulars quickly develop a narrative direction for their characters, as well as a specialty. Each regular chooses one of 100 archetypes for their character. You can do so randomly by rolling a D100 or by pulling a card if you have our archetype deck. Outside of archetypes, there are 6 roles in a 1shots adventure, and there are always some form of the leader, the brain, the brawn, the specialist, the charmer, and the speedster. Every character in the crew shares the same base stats, which are determined at the beginning of the game. In addition, every role except the leader gains a specialty bonus. The brain gets +1 brain, the brawn gets +1 brawn, the specialist gets +1 focus, the charmer gets +1 charm, and the speedster gets +1 speed. The leader is more likely to have plot hooks or scene directions that target them, and if no one else jumps on them, narrative decisions default to the leader. Now, moving on to the gameplay. As far as tabletop role-playing games go, 1shots as a standalone game is quite improv-heavy. As a general rule, the fewer rules a TTRPG has, the more the game will rely on improv and role-playing. And since I've reduced the core rules of 1shots to a booklet the size of 4 playing cards, you can imagine that the players, and not the rules, will be doing the heavy lifting as far as gameplay is concerned. For those of you who might be intimidated by the rules of tabletop role-playing games, even though you're well-practiced at being silly and making up stories with your friends, 1shots might actually be the perfect entry-level game for you. The actual game mechanics are almost as simple as they can get. All TTRPGs follow a cycle that can be broken down into 3 steps that gameplay flows through, similar to the 3 sinks often used in a bar to quickly wash and reuse glassware. While a dirty glass will follow the set pattern of washing, rinsing, and sanitizing, a TTRPG will go through the process of a description, a reaction, and resolution. So let's break down what exactly that means in terms of playing 1shots. Sink number 1, description. The house will describe the scene in order to set the stage for the rest of the players. They will use narrative terms or the ideas of the story to paint a word picture and describe the actions of the world and the story. This will go on until either they are interrupted by a regular or they prompt the regulars to take action or react to the scene. No matter how long the house spends washing the description, it will always find its way into sink number 2, reaction. The regulars are in charge of sink number 2 as they react with what they want their characters to do in response to the description. Things like, can I talk to the bartender? My character wants to break down the door, or I'm going to try to do a quadruple backflip. Once the regulars have finished rinsing their reaction, but before gameplay gets circulated back out as another description, it gets dunked in sink number 3, resolution. This is where the house will resolve the regular's reaction to the description. The resolution will come in the form of a yes, a no, or a maybe, with the maybe being followed by some rules of the game before eventually turning into a solid yes or no. Things like, yeah, you can walk over and talk to the bartender would lead directly to interaction with an NPC, while no, you can't do a quadruple backflip would either lead to the character attempting and failing to do a quadruple backflip and suffering the consequences, or the regular deciding that their character would do something else. If the answer is maybe, the house will call for a check to check and see if the answer is a yes or no. Something like, the door seems sturdy, but it's possible that you could knock it down, so let's do a brawn check. We'll get into what happens when the house asks for the check next, but first let's do a quick recap of our 3-sync cycle of gameplay. First, the house washes the description, then the regulars rinse the reaction before the house sanitizes the resolution. And then we do it all over again, and over, and over, and over, until the game is over or we die. Wash, rinse, sanitize, repeat. There are 5 stats in 1shots, and they are all 5-letter words because the game is designed with the likelihood that players may get progressively more and more intoxicated as the game goes on. We have brain, brawn, focus, charm, and speed. Whenever the house asks for the check, they are checking to see if the regular's character has enough brain, brawn, focus, charm, or speed to accomplish the particular narrative action they want to do. If you recall, in our example scenario, the regular has said, my character wants to break the door down. And the house has replied, the door seems sturdy, but it's possible that you could knock it down, so let's do a brawn check. So how do we figure out if the regular has enough brawn to satisfy the check? The house and regular are both dealt 2 cards apiece, one face down and one face up. Face cards are worth 10, number cards are worth their face value, and aces are worth 1 or 11, whichever is most beneficial to the player whose hand the ace belongs to. The house is trying to get their hand to add up to 21, or to get their hand higher than the regular's hand without going over 21. The house can look at their face down card and can choose to add a garnish at any time during the check by drawing a card from the deck and adding it face up to their hand. The regular doesn't have access to garnishes or hitting. Instead, the regular's hand is composed of the value of their 2 cards, any applicable stat bonuses, in this case brawn, and the value of any dice they choose to roll. A regular can roll one of the 7 dice by taking a shot, but each die can only be rolled once per game. Start with the smallest die and work your way up. Once the house and the regular have decided to stop adding garnishes or taking shots, they reveal all their cards and score their hands. However, the house can choose not to reveal their face down card, instead saving it for the next check. If the house chooses to keep their face down card, only their face up cards count toward their hand on this check. If the house is 21, they win. If the house is more than 21, the regular wins the check. If the house does not have exactly 21 and the regular's hand is bigger than the house's hand, the regular wins. If the house and the regular have hands of equal value, they tie. If the house wins, the regular receives 2 parts failure. If the regular wins, they receive 2 parts success. If they both tie, they receive 1 part success and 1 part failure, which is carried out in the next description. So let's walk through this example. The regular is dealt the 4 of clubs face up, worth 4, and the jack of Daniels face down, worth 10. They get a +1 brawn bonus from the crew stats, and they get an additional +1 bonus from their specialty roll as the brawn of the crew. 4 + 10 + 1 + 1, 16. A decently strong hand, but not enough to be confident in this game. The regular looks over and sees that the house has been dealt the king of spades, face up, which is worth 10. The regular doesn't know that the house's face down card is a 5, giving the house a total of 15. If neither decides to take a garnish or shot, the result would be 2 part success because the regular's hand, 16, is bigger than the house's hand, 15, and the house doesn't have 21. The house might describe this resolution by saying something like, not only do you knock down the door, but you can tell that everyone else in the room is intimidated by your strength and you'll have no trouble with any of the rough-looking patrons at the bar. But let's say the house instead chooses to add a garnish, and they are dealt the 5 of hearts face up, giving them a total of 20. If both sides were to stop there, the result would be 2 parts failure because the house's hand would be bigger than the regular's hand without going over 21 or busting. The house might describe this resolution by saying something like, you go to slam against the door, but not only does the door not budge, but you strain or break your wrist in the process. However, let's say the regular had decided to take a shot, roll a die, and got +4 from the die, giving them a total of 20. Now, if both the house and the regular don't do anything more, their hands are both 20, and the tie would result in 1 part success and 1 part failure. The house might describe this resolution by saying something like, you're able to knock down the door, but you strain or break your wrist in the process. Once the crew has taken all 7 shots, they will have no dice, and it is time to settle up. Settling up doesn't mean the adventure ends. Instead, the crew choose any stat that doesn't have a +5. You don't get to roll any dice, but you may increase the chosen stat by +1 for the rest of the adventure. If you're playing one-shots in tandem with another game, it gets even simpler. Anytime a player is about to roll dice or has just rolled some dice, but before the GM has announced what the result is, they can choose to ask the GM if they can take a shot. If the GM says yes, then they take the shot, roll the appropriate die, and add that die to their roll as though it were some form of bardic inspiration. The GM determines how the crew stats come into play, or if they come into play. My recommendation is that PC rolls can be boosted by the crew stats in any scene where 3 or more crew members are present to represent their synergy, but that's just my suggestion. Now go find us on Kickstarter or wherever our game is currently being sold, and have yourself a good time.